In 146 BC, after centuries of resistance, the once mighty Greek world was crushed beneath Rome's iron fist. This wasn't just a military victory, it marked the dawn of a new era. How did Rome, a young republic, manage to conquer one of the most powerful civilizations in history? How did a rising power from the west dismantle the glorious Greek world? Rome, a republic with growing ambitions, was about to change the course of history. Greece, once a beacon of culture and intellect, was fractured and vulnerable. Rome saw an opportunity and seized it. From early skirmishes to Rome's final, decisive victory at Corinth, this was a battle that would reshape the Mediterranean world. But how did a republic so young conquer an empire so old? Stick around to find out. Rome's rise was nothing short of spectacular. It started as a small city-state along the banks of the Tiber River, but over time, it grew into a formidable power. Rome wasn't just about brute force. Its strength came from a combination of military strategy, shrewd political alliances, and relentless expansion. As rival tribes around them fell one by one, Rome's army, disciplined, well-organized, and ever-evolving, proved to be unstoppable. Unlike the Greek city-states, which were often bogged down in internal conflicts, Rome had the unity and political flexibility to rise above and dominate the Italian peninsula. Every victory, whether through clever diplomacy or sheer might, carved a path for the Romans to reach further, pushing outwards into new territories. The result? A military machine that could take on anyone, and by 265 BC, Rome controlled almost all of Italy. Meanwhile, across the sea, the Greek world was unraveling. Greece, once the cradle of democracy, philosophy, and art, was slipping into chaos. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BC, had left Greece torn apart. Athens and Sparta, the two powerhouses, had clashed for years, weakening each other and leaving the rest of Greece vulnerable. The result? A fragmented collection of city-states, none strong enough to stand on its own. Even the rise of Macedonia, first under Philip II and then his son, Alexander the Great, offered a brief moment of unity. But when Alexander died in 323 BC, his empire shattered into competing Hellenistic kingdoms. Greece, once a unified and dominant force, was now divided, with no central authority to defend it from external threats. Rival factions fought for power, and the Greek city-states became pawns in the larger game of empire building. The once mighty Greek world, now fractured and weak, was in no shape to fend off Rome's growing influence. The stage was set. While Rome's power was on the rise, Greece's political fragmentation made it an easy target. And that would be the beginning of a story that would change the Mediterranean forever. Rome's first encounter with the Greek world didn't come with a direct military confrontation but through a gradual involvement in its politics. It all began in southern Italy, in the region known as Magna Graecia. Greek colonies, once proud and independent, were now caught between the pressure of local Italian tribes and the growing influence of Carthage in nearby Sicily. Rome saw an opportunity to intervene, positioning itself as the protector of the Greek cities. But what started as a strategic move soon escalated, drawing Rome deeper into the affairs of the Greek world. Rome's first significant involvement in Greek politics came during the First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC. The conflict between Rome and Carthage, over control of Sicily, put Rome in direct contact with the Greek world. Carthage, a powerful rival, had long controlled parts of Sicily, and as Rome began to intervene, it found itself slowly becoming a dominant force in the region. This wasn't just about fighting for Sicily, it was about positioning Rome as a key player in the Mediterranean. With its naval power growing, Rome's influence over Greek cities would follow, setting the stage for further entanglements in Greek politics. What started as a distant conflict would soon become a direct clash with Greek powers, shaping Rome's inevitable path toward domination. But the Pyrrhic War was Rome's first true test on the grand stage of Mediterranean warfare. It wasn't just about territorial gains, it was about proving Rome's resilience against a formidable force. King Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek ruler with big ambitions. Pyrrhus saw the growing Roman power as a direct threat to the Greek cities in southern Italy, particularly those in Magna Graecia, which had long been Greek colonies. Determined to revive Greek influence in the region, Pyrrhus marched into Italy with an army that included 20,000 infantry, 3,000 cavalry, and, perhaps most famously, 20 war elephants. It was an impressive force, and for a time, it seemed like he might turn the tide. The Battle of Heraclea in 280 BC was his first major engagement against the Romans. Pyrrhus emerged victorious, but the price was steep. Rome, despite its losses, fought with a ferocity that left Pyrrhus both impressed and increasingly alarmed. His army had won the battle, but it had been so decimated that he was forced to rely on reinforcements just to keep fighting. Pyrrhus himself reportedly said, "Another such victory and I shall be undone." It wasn't long before he faced the Romans again at the Battle of Asculum in 279 BC, where, once more, he claimed victory. But the results were the same. His forces were ravaged, their morale shattered. His military machine was beginning to show signs of wear, and despite his tactical brilliance, the cost of each victory was starting to outweigh the strategic gain. This was where Rome's true strength began to shine. It wasn't in the size of its victories, but in its ability to absorb losses and keep pushing forward. The term Pyrrhic victory became synonymous with winning at a cost so devastating it might as well be a defeat. Pyrrhus's successes were hollow. He'd won the battles but lost the war, slowly bleeding his forces dry. Meanwhile, the Romans, though battered, had a seemingly endless supply of soldiers from their allied cities across Italy. They could afford to lose battles but never ran out of steam. With each skirmish, the Romans learned, adapted, and regrouped. Their military discipline and ability to recover, even after crushing losses, set them apart from their enemies. This resilience became a defining feature of Rome and would carry them through countless wars in the centuries to come. As the war dragged on, Pyrrhus realized he couldn't continue at this pace. His forces were worn out, his resources depleted, and the Romans, despite their losses, showed no sign of letting up. In 275 BC, Pyrrhus finally faced the Romans one last time at Beneventum. His army, exhausted and demoralized, couldn't hold up against the relentless Roman push. Pyrrhus withdrew from Italy, leaving Rome with its first major military triumph on the international stage. The end of the Pyrrhic War didn't just mark the withdrawal of one Greek king, it solidified something much bigger. Rome had proven to the Mediterranean world that it was more than a regional power. It had shown that, no matter the odds, it could outlast its enemies and keep expanding. Pyrrhus might have retreated, but the Greek world was now fully aware of the growing power of Rome, and that awareness would continue to haunt them as Rome's influence spread even further. The stage was set for Rome's deeper involvement in Greek affairs during the backdrop of the Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC, a war Rome was fighting against its bitter rival, Carthage. During this conflict, King Philip V of Macedonia saw an opportunity to expand his influence in the Mediterranean, especially in the eastern territories. But his growing power raised alarms in Rome. Desperate to secure their own position, Rome formed alliances with several Greek city-states in order to counter Philip's ambitions. The First Macedonian War, 214 to 205 BC, wasn't exactly a full-scale engagement. Rather, it was a limited affair, with Rome mostly trying to neutralize Philip's growing influence without direct confrontation. It was a struggle that would end in a stalemate. In the end, the peace didn't result in any significant territorial changes, but it did mark Rome's official entry into Greek politics. Rome had thrown its hat into the ring, and there was no turning back. However, it didn't take long before the Romans were facing a much more significant challenge. By 200 BC, Philip V of Macedonia had started acting aggressively in the eastern Mediterranean. His ambitions now extended beyond his borders, threatening the balance of power in the region. He wasn't just fighting smaller factions or local tribes, he was encroaching on territories that Rome had an interest in. This alarmed the Romans, and by 200 BC, they were ready to declare war in the Second Macedonian War. The turning point came in 197 BC, at the Battle of Cynocephaly. This battle was a game-changer in the Mediterranean. Philip's phalanx, a formidable formation of tightly packed infantry that had dominated the ancient world for centuries, met the Roman legions head-on. The Macedonian phalanx was formidable on paper, but Rome had adapted. Roman legions, with their flexible formations and mobility, proved to be far superior. They decisively defeated Philip's army, and the victory marked the beginning of Roman dominance over Greece. Rome wasn't just an emerging regional power anymore, it was now a force to be reckoned with. After the battle, the Romans went on to secure the Treaty of Tempe in 196 BC. This peace treaty forced Philip to withdraw from Greece, dismantle his powerful navy, and recognize the independence of many Greek city-states. However, these cities were now under Roman protection, essentially Roman control disguised as protection. While it looked like Greece was still independent, Rome had successfully established itself as the power broker in the region. But the story didn't end there. The Macedonian kings weren't ready to let go of their influence just yet. In 171 BC, the throne passed to Perseus, the son of Philip V, and he sought to restore Macedonia to its former glory. He aimed to reassert Macedonian dominance and resist Roman influence. His efforts were met with Roman resistance, and in 168 BC, the Third Macedonian War reached its climax at the Battle of Pydna. Perseus, despite his best efforts, was decisively defeated by the Roman legions. This victory effectively ended Macedonian independence, and by 146 BC, Macedonia was formally annexed as a Roman province. Perseus was captured, and the last vestiges of Macedonian power were snuffed out. Rome's power in Greece was now unchallenged, and the Greek world, once a dominant cultural and political force, was firmly under Roman control. The Macedonian Wars, which had once been about restoring Greek power, had instead solidified Rome's hold over the eastern Mediterranean. By now, Rome had made it clear, it wasn't just about military force. While Roman legions were a critical element in the conquest of Greece, their real power lay in their ability to manipulate the political dynamics of the Greek world. Roman diplomacy became just as important as their sword. Rome wasn't a brute force empire that simply marched in and conquered. It knew how to use cunning, divide and conquer, and turn enemies into allies. Rome understood that Greece was not a unified, cohesive state. It was a collection of city-states, each with its own political interests, rivalries, and allegiances. And this fragmentation? It was Rome's golden opportunity. Rome's first move was to play these city-states against each other, weaving a complex web of alliances. A prime example of this was the Achaean League. Formed by a collection of city-states in the northern and central Peloponnese, the Achaean League was initially one of Rome's key allies. They were trying to stand tall against the growing power of Macedonia, and Rome saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their own position by supporting the League. The Achaean League was in constant competition with the Aetolian League, another confederation of Greek city-states, who had also formed an alliance with Rome. By supporting one league over the other, Rome could control both factions, ensuring that neither side would ever become too powerful or united to challenge Rome's expanding influence. This strategy worked wonders for Rome. The Greek states, too embroiled in their own internal struggles, couldn't focus their efforts on Rome. Rome, on the other hand, could sit back and watch them fight among themselves. By the time they decided to intervene directly, Rome could always point to one of the many factions as an ally, turning a potential enemy into a client state, all without a sword being lifted. But Rome's diplomacy wasn't just about forming alliances, it was about exploiting every division, no matter how small. For instance, during the Second Macedonian War, while the Roman legions were fighting on the battlefield, they were also working the diplomatic front. They provided military support to the Aetolian League, who were bitter rivals with the Achaeans. This further fractured Greek unity, as city-states like Sparta and other smaller factions saw themselves caught between two increasingly powerful forces, Rome and their local rival factions. The Achaeans, who had been long-standing allies of Rome, were used as a counterbalance. By the time the Romans turned on the Achaeans, the Greek states were so divided that they couldn't come together to resist effectively. At the same time, Rome was cultivating its relationship with Greek city-states like Athens, Corinth, and others. Many of these cities, while outwardly maintaining their independence, were already operating under Roman protection and control. These subtle moves ensured that, while Rome's military presence was often minimal, their influence was everywhere. They didn't need to take over every city, they simply needed to ensure that every city was either on their side or too weak to resist. But as effective as Rome's diplomacy was, it could only work for so long before cracks began to appear in the Greek facade. For all of Rome's manipulations, it was the internal struggles of Greek city-states that played right into Rome's hands. The very thing that Rome had exploited to its advantage, the internal strife and fragmentation of Greece, was also the thing that slowly wore down the ability of the Greek world to maintain its independence. The rivalry between the Achaean League and the Aetolian League was a perfect illustration of this internal division. The Aetolians, who had initially worked alongside Rome, grew more disillusioned with Roman influence as Rome's dominance in Greece solidified. They resented Rome's growing power and its interference in local affairs, and in 146 BC, the Aetolian League actually rebelled against Roman control. But their rebellion came too late and without the support of the other Greek city-states. Rome quickly crushed the Aetolian resistance and cemented its position as the sole power broker in Greece. This internal Greek division played out across the entire Greek world. City-states that had once prided themselves on their fierce independence were now squabbling over small territories, local influence, and rivalries. The greatest example of this was the Achaean League's rebellion against Rome. While they had been loyal allies of Rome for some time, tensions boiled over when they felt that their interests were no longer being represented by Roman rule. The Achaeans, driven by their own internal struggles for power, launched a final defiant stand against Rome in 146 BC, hoping to reassert their independence. However, their rebellion only served to further expose the weaknesses within the Greek world. The Achaeans, despite being a formidable force at times, were divided. Some cities in the League were less enthusiastic about resisting Roman rule, and others were quick to abandon the cause. Without unity and coordination, the rebellion fell apart, and Rome responded with overwhelming force. In the final blow to Greek independence, Rome decisively crushed the Achaean League, sacking Corinth in 146 BC and burning it to the ground. This wasn't just a military victory, it was the symbolic end of the Greek resistance. The destruction of Corinth sent a loud message that Rome was not only the dominant military force in the Mediterranean but also the master of Greek politics and culture. In essence, Rome's diplomacy, coupled with the internal divisions of Greek city-states, ensured that Greece would never be able to rise against the Romans. Rome knew that their greatest asset wasn't just their army but their ability to sow division and manipulate Greek politics to their advantage. The result? A fractured Greek world, incapable of resisting the power of Rome. Rome didn't just conquer Greece through war, it conquered it through clever diplomacy and a keen understanding of Greek weaknesses. By turning city-states against each other, exploiting rivalries, and fostering divisions, Rome ensured that Greece would become just another province in its growing empire. The Roman conquest of Greece was more than just a military victory. It marked a profound shift not only in the political landscape but in the cultural, social, and intellectual realms. Greece, once a collection of fiercely independent city-states that had set the stage for many of the Western world's greatest achievements in philosophy, art, and governance, had been reduced to a province in the vast Roman Empire. It's hard to imagine a civilization as rich and storied as Greece's falling under the control of an emerging power like Rome. But that's exactly what happened. From the political subjugation of Greek city-states to the destruction of Corinth, the road to Roman domination was paved with war, diplomacy, and the slow erosion of Greek autonomy. Yet, despite this conquest, Greece's influence on Rome was never fully erased. If anything, it grew stronger, albeit in a different form. Greece's political independence may have been extinguished, but its cultural and intellectual contributions became the very building blocks of Roman civilization. Rome adopted Greek art, philosophy, and politics, essentially using Greek culture as the model for its own burgeoning empire. What began as military dominance slowly evolved into cultural admiration, as the Romans absorbed Greek traditions into their daily lives. Cities like Athens, though politically dominated by Rome, remained intellectual hubs, continuously shaping Roman thought and identity. Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean was absolute. It stood as the greatest power of its time, expanding its borders, fortifying its influence, and laying the foundation for the empire that would dominate the Western world for centuries. The Mediterranean basin, once a region of fierce competition and fractured empires, now fell under Rome's grasp. The military power that brought about this conquest would continue to be Rome's strength, but it was Greece's cultural power that would leave an indelible mark on Rome's future. The Roman Empire, despite its military supremacy, could never escape the intellectual and artistic weight of Greek civilization. Even as Rome controlled the lands, Greek thought, literature, and art continued to shape the Roman identity. But the legacy of the Roman conquest of Greece didn't stop there. The fusion of Greek and Roman culture created the foundation for Western civilization. The ideas of democracy, civic duty, philosophy, and ethics, first explored by Greek thinkers, became integral to Roman governance and laws. The Romans didn't just inherit Greek intellectual traditions, they expanded upon them, refining ideas about law, citizenship, and society that still influence our political systems today. The artistic achievements of Greece, its sculpture, architecture, and drama, became the standard that the Romans sought to emulate and improve. The Greco-Roman world that emerged from this conquest laid the groundwork for the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the development of modern Western culture. The influence of Greece on Rome wasn't just intellectual, it was practical too. Roman innovations in government, architecture, and engineering were built on the intellectual frameworks laid by the Greeks. Whether through the adaptation of Greek philosophy into Roman law, the use of Greek architectural designs in Roman buildings, or the study of Greek military tactics, Rome's rise and success can't be separated from the legacy of Greece. The Romans may have been the ones to build the empire, but they did so on the intellectual and cultural shoulders of the Greeks. The legacy of the Roman conquest of Greece is one that spans centuries, stretching far beyond the Roman Empire's fall. Greek philosophy, art, literature, and politics would continue to inspire thinkers, artists, and leaders for generations to come. The Greco-Roman world left us with a rich cultural heritage that has influenced everything from the arts to our modern understanding of governance and law. In the end, the rise of Rome over Greece was not just the end of one empire, it was the beginning of a lasting legacy that would shape the future of the world. The conquest of Greece by Rome wasn't the simple dominance of one empire over another. It was the fusion of two great cultures that would forever alter the course of history. And in that transformation, the influence of Greece would endure, not just within Rome but throughout the centuries of Western civilization that followed. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Roman conquest of Greece and the lasting legacy of Greco-Roman culture, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical explorations. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to life. Thanks for watching.